All right, it is our very last video lesson. A little bittersweet, I know. Um, I have enjoyed making these video lessons surprisingly much, more than I expected. So maybe something I continue in the future. We shall see. Anyway, in this lesson, we're going to be going over our own history here in the Diocese of Lincoln. For those of you who don't know, the Diocese of Lincoln is the area ruled over by the Bishop of Lincoln. It's everything in Nebraska south of the south bank of the South Fork of the Platte River. Islands in the Platte River do not belong to the Diocese of Lincoln, and that little area of land between the North Platte and the South Platte out in western Nebraska also does not belong to the Diocese of Lincoln. So we are the south. We are the diocese in southern Nebraska. Now, Lincoln, we're a small diocese. We have about 90,000 Catholics in the diocese, which is pretty small by national standards. We are surprisingly famous, and so that's for our size. So that's going to be part of the reason why. One of the things that we will hopefully discover in our, um, you know, whatchamacallit, lesson is why that is. Anyway, hope you like the picture. This was taken back when I was in seminary. All these guys put on superhero shirts under their clerical shirts. They were seminarians as well, and then took a photo of themselves revealing their superhero identities. Father Darrow, as you can see, is in this picture. Deacon Alex Sassy, soon to be Father Sassy, is in this picture. The guy in the middle, Robert Blood, is from Illinois. He's a priest now, although you've probably never met him, although maybe. The other two, Esteban Benton and Murphy Lyerly, didn't get ordained, but they're still good guys. They are very good people. So anyway, all right. The Diocese of Lincoln was founded in 1887. Um, the area under Nebraska was originally part of a mission territory, a giant area that wasn't really a diocese. Um, and then the Diocese of Omaha was formed out of that mission territory. And then in 1887, the dioceses of Lincoln and Cheyenne, Wyoming, were split off from the Diocese of Omaha, and that is how we were formed. We are a gigantic diocese area-wise. It takes about 8 hours to drive from one end to the other, and our land area is larger than Connecticut, Massachusetts, New Jersey, and Rhode Island combined. That's pretty big. Um, like I said before, we have about 90,000 Catholics now, which is about 20%, 25%, 15%, somewhere in there of our land, of the population of our land area. So 5% up to 15 to 25%. We've improved. Okay, don't know if that means we've made a ton of converts, but hey, we've improved. We also have the privilege of having the oldest Catholic church in the entire state of Nebraska. St. Benedict's in Nebraska City is the oldest Catholic church in the state of Nebraska. It's older than the Diocese of Lincoln. I think it's probably older than the state of Nebraska. I don't know if it has been rebuilt since then. The first cathedral of the Diocese of Lincoln was St. Mary's, which is the white church that you can see right here. St. Mary's in downtown Lincoln was the first cathedral of the Diocese of Lincoln. St. Mary's was originally built as a Protestant church, actually, and was a very racist, segregated Protestant church. The black people had to sit upstairs, which is why their choir loft is so big, because it had to fit all the black people. So, when the Catholics came along and, they put that space to good use. First Bishop of Lincoln was a man named Bishop Bonnicum, Irish, I believe. And I don't know a whole ton about his achievements, but I do know that our home for retired priests is called Bonnicum House, named after him. Here in this picture, you can see 4 priests who live at Bonnicum House and two sisters that take care of them. I unfortunately cannot name all 4. That one in white, that's Father Kalin, not the same person as Monsignor Kalin, who we talked about in the last lesson. This is his younger brother. As far as I know, he never did anything naughty. All right, the second bishop of Nebraska was Bishop Teehan. Bishop Teehan was a German on both sides of his family from Indiana who became a bishop in 1911. He became the Bishop of Lincoln and stayed until 1917. And after that, he moved to Denver, which seems to be a common theme among the bishops of Lincoln. They often end up or come from Denver. And Anyway, Bishop Tihan would have been the bishop when the Czech community was establishing itself in Nebraska. The biggest year for immigration of Czechs to the United States was 1907. 13,000 Czechs entered the United States to come and live um, in 1907. But they typically, they didn't always necessarily find their way out to Nebraska right away. They may have stopped in New York, gotten a job in New York for a while. They may have searched around for a while. They may have stayed with friends or relatives. Okay, so I'm going to consider Bishop Tihan to be our Czech assimilation bishop, getting them all established um, in Nebraska. Um, Nebraska is one of the, specifically Butler County, but any few other places in Nebraska. Nebraska is one of the most Czech places in the United States. The Czechs are not a large immigrant group, and kind of like the Germans, they're kind of divided between Catholics and Protestants, although in Nebraska we seem to have got mostly the Catholic Czechs, although we got some of the Protestants too, the Moravians. Um, but anyway, Butler County is very heavily Czech. There are towns in Butler County that are as much as 40% Czech descent, people that live in those towns. For the United States, that is huge. Okay? One of the most famous is Wilbur, the Czech capital of the USA. There's also Prague, Rulo, Brno, and several other places that are very, very Czech. And as you probably know, Nebraskans are very proud of their Czech heritage. The Nebraskans who are Czech are very proud of their Czech heritage. To give you an idea of just how unique Nebraska is in this regard, um, I didn't even know what a kolache was until I was probably about 9 years old, and we had lived here in Nebraska for 2 years because I wasn't born here and my parents aren't Czech. So this whole kolache thing was like, it was this new amazing food. It was like, wow, this is really interesting because I hadn't grown up with my grandma making it every weekend or whenever your grandmas make it. Sorry, maybe they don't make it that often. Anyway, so that was a very pleasant discovery upon moving to Nebraska, was the wonders of the kolaches. The next bishop was Bishop O'Reilly from 1918 to 1923, and then following him Bishop Beckman from 1924 to 1930. Um, the next bishop was Bishop Kuchera. Bishop Kuchera was kind of cool because he was Nebraska's first bishop that had Czech heritage. He was from Minnesota, from a Czech family from Minnesota. He was a very bright kid. Okay, he was the sort of kid who was, the leader at his high school. He was the, you know, he was the Luke Combs of his high school. Okay, I used to teach Luke Combs. He's a very intelligent student. Anyway, Bishop Kuchera was invited to attend West Point, the U.S. Military Academy, which of course is a very, very great honor to be chosen to go to West Point. And he said no. He turned it down because he wanted to be a priest instead. I suppose he could have done both, but that wasn't what God wanted for him. He was Bishop of Nebraska from 1930 to 1957. There's actually a building in the Diocese of Lincoln called Kuchera Hall, and it's a house for priests who don't work at parishes but have other sorts of jobs. It is literally right next to Pius. It's the first house you see if you walk down the sidewalk past the football field, and there's a kind of a blockish house on the right. It's like 3 stories tall. That's Kuchera Hall. There's several priests that live there that work for the diocese but don't work in parishes. Father McLean lives there, who works in prisons and hospitals. Father Grant is there, who works in prisons and hospitals. I forget who else lives there. Maybe Father Stamiti, who I think is retired. Anyway, named after this bishop, Bishop Kuchera. All right. Things in Lincoln really start to get interesting with Bishop Casey, and I didn't put any dates on him, but he would be 1957 to 1967. So he was bishop here for 10 years. Bishop Casey was our bishop during the Second Vatican Council. So Bishop Casey was the representative from Lincoln who went to Vatican II. I don't think he was especially known for anything at Vatican II, but he was there. In Lincoln, in the 10 years that Bishop Casey was in Lincoln, Bishop Casey built a ton of diocesan buildings. He built our chancery. The chancery is the bishop's offices. He built Villa Marie Home and School. He built Villa Marie Home and School for Exceptional Children, which is a Catholic school in the Diocese of Lincoln for special needs kids. Actually, maybe Villa Marie refers to the convent. I forget. Anyway, he built Villa Marie, which might be the convent, might be the school for the special needs kids. Anyway, not 100% sure which one, but he built Villa Marie. He built the Waverly Retreat House. Once in a while, when you're at your parish, you may hear advertisements for retreats. A retreat is a time which is specifically dedicated to prayer, and you can spend some time at the retreat house away from home so that you can actually focus on prayer. And you have days where you can do nothing else. You know what a retreat is. Well, I'm explaining it to you. Pius has retreats too. Anyway, when you're an adult, you can go on retreats. They're at the Waverly Retreat House. They're more quiet than the Pius ones, less fun and games. Okay, but they're still a very good prayer experience if that's what you're going for. Besides, Waverly Retreat House grounds, not the building itself, but the grounds is actually quite beautiful. Bishop Casey built a lot of schools. He did not build Pius. I think who built Pius? I want to say it was, I forget. I want to say Tehan, but I'm not sure. Anyway, he did not build Pius, but he built a lot of schools in the Diocese of Lincoln. He built Aquinas in David City, I know that, and several others. He built the original Newman Center. Some of you may remember the original Newman Center. Some of you may not. You can see a picture of it down on the lower right. It wasn't as nice as our current Newman Center. Okay, our current Newman Center is gorgeous. It is amazing. Okay, this was the previous Newman Center, the one Bishop Casey built. It actually wasn't too bad. Okay, it looks a little odd just because everything is blue, and there's a song about that. But it was actually a great building to pray in. The 1 year that I spent in college at UNL before I went to the seminary, you know, that was the first place where I started Eucharistic adoration regularly. I didn't do Eucharistic adoration really before my 1 year at the Newman Center, and I loved praying in that building. It was so quiet, it was so peaceful, and the blue light when they would turn off all the electric lights, the all blue light was actually really cool, and I really loved it. If you had a highlighter and the light was all blue and you would highlight a passage in the Bible, oh, it was great, like pop out at you. And finally, Bishop Casey built our cathedral. Um, our cathedral, as you can see, has a little, it looks like a box. It looks like an empty tomb because it's the cathedral of the risen Christ. Okay, our cathedral has a reputation around the United States for being ugly. It's certainly unconventional. Um, and, you know, if any of you or anyone who tries to say that Vatican Council II ruined the church has to remember, okay, the Lincoln Cathedral was built before Vatican Council II. Ugliness existed in the church before people went crazy after the council. The craziness was already starting. It was not the council's fault, okay? Bishop Casey built this monstrosity in Lincoln, and we are stuck with it. Now, I have to admit, after having lived here in Lincoln for 23 years, it's kind of grown on me, okay? I like it better than I did, but it leaves much to be desired. Sorry if any of you are from Cathedral and you love your church. It's beautiful in many ways, but it could be better. All right. Now, Bishop Casey, after he got done being bishop in Lincoln, moved to Denver. And this was around the time that my mom would have been in grade school and high school in Denver. And, um, he was in Lincoln for Vatican II. He was in Denver right after Vatican II. And my grandfather was, aware practicing Catholic during those days. He will tell you that Bishop Casey ruined Denver. Okay, Denver was going along well, and then all of a sudden Bishop Casey gets there and he lets the crazies run the place. Okay, there's all kinds of strange things going on at Mass in those days. They were teaching strange things in the school. As I might have told you before, my mom said that she went to Catholic school K through 12 and learned nothing except in 4th grade when she had one good teacher. Okay, Bishop Casey was part of how that happened. Basically, what he did was he wasn't crazy himself. I mean, he did build our cathedral, but his thing was he let the crazies run the place. He wasn't a firm leader who was willing to say no to people like that, and he let them ruin Denver. Denver is doing a lot better now. Okay, World War II, World Youth Day in 1993 was in Denver, and it really injected a lot of enthusiasm for the church into the city of Denver. And so there's actually a lot of great Catholic organizations in Denver now. Also, they've had some really good bishops since then. Um, they most Chaput was a wonderful bishop for them. And the successor, who's there now, Archbishop Aquila, was actually my mom's assistant pastor when she was a kid. So, she was a big fan when Archbishop Aquila got named Archbishop of Denver. She was very happy. Anyway, all right. Bishop Casey was founded by Bishop Flavin. Okay, and um, Bishop Flavin uh, was also an interesting person. Okay? He was bishop from 1967 to 1992. So 25 years. That's a long time for someone to be a bishop in one place. It's a really long time to be a bishop. Okay? Uh, and so Bishop Flavin, in many ways, worked wonders for the Lincoln Diocese. He founded the CKs, who, run several of our schools and do it very well. If, the quality of my students from those schools is to be believed, other schools are good too, but the CKs do a really good job. He managed to maintain all of the schools that Bishop Casey built. Bishop Flavin was good on making sure that the schools would be um, strong. Bishop Flavin was kind of the first bishop who um, started to get Lincoln known for its number of vocations to the priesthood and religious life. Okay, I don't know if you know this, but the Diocese of Lincoln has one of the highest ratios of priests to Catholics in the United States. I think it has the highest. Okay, we have a lot of priests relative to our number of Catholics. Um, and a lot of that is Bishop Flavin's doing. He was a big promoter of education and vocations. Those were his priorities, and he was good at it. Okay, um, and in that, I believe he was the one who made Father Kalin the vocations director, which, Father Kalin was good at getting vocations and, perhaps not good at certain other things. Anyway, the other thing Bishop Flavin did, which was um, difficult to do, was he didn't go crazy. Okay? The story goes that Bishop Casey had a council of priests who would advise him, and he would take their advice often. When he went to Denver, he kept on doing the same thing, and they were the ones that went crazy. When Bishop Flavin came to Lincoln, he met with this group of priests, and they brought him some suggestions of what they wanted. And he's like, okay, we're never meeting again, and I won't listen to a single thing you say, and basically shut them down because they were, kind of caught up in the craziness. They were a victim of the bad communication. They were thinking everything in the church is going to change. Let's go change stuff. And Bishop Flavin was like, no, let's not change things unless we're supposed to. And he ended up not changing a whole lot, but it avoided the craziness. Okay? And so that is, we start to get a reputation here. Okay? Bishop Flavin would have been bishop during the period of Vietnamese immigration. The big year for Vietnamese immigration to the United States was 1975. This is the year when the boat people phenomenon was really big. People escaping Vietnam on boats to escape communist oppression, sometimes for the sake of practicing their Catholic faith freely. Okay, so Bishop Flavin would have been the bishop during the period of their immigration. All right, next comes Bishop Bruskowitz. Some of you may actually remember a time when he was the bishop. From 1992 to 2012. He was bishop for 20 years, which is also a really long time to be a bishop in one diocese. Bishop Bruskowitz grew up in Wisconsin, and his sister became a nun. She also lives in the diocese. Sister, what's her first name? Colette, Sister Colette Bruskowitz. She's kind of the assistant to the superintendent of schools. Anyway, Bishop Emeritus Bruskowitz is still alive. He lives right next door to Bishop Conley. You still see him from time to time. He still is in good spirits. And Bishop Bruskowitz was probably the first Bishop of Lincoln to become famous / infamous, and that was because he was known for being controversial, contrarian, and different. Okay, he did not care one bit what other bishops thought of him, and made up his own mind. Bishop Bruskowitz is the reason why the Diocese of Lincoln is the only diocese in the United States in which altar girls are forbidden across the whole diocese. This is I believe, I should check my laws. I'm doing the law for me. Yes, it was Bishop Bruskowitz. This is a Bishop Bruskowitz rule that forbids them, okay? And it is a very strict rule. If I were to allow an altar girl at one of my masses, I would be automatically suspended, which would mean I would be unable to celebrate any sacraments until the bishop forgave me, okay? Which I would have to inform him of my nefarious deed, okay? Like it or not, that's the rule, and that was Bishop Bruskwitz's rule that Bishop Conley has chosen to uphold. Um, Rationale being that those who serve at the altar will fall in love with actually participating in the altar at the Mass in a new way, and they'll start to think about celebrating it. And since girls can't be priests anyway, such a position and such an encouragement would be kind of, in his mind, wasted on them. And, just in case you haven't noticed, once girls start doing something, boys quit. So that was kind of his way of thinking. What probably made him even more famous / infamous was his very public excommunication of members of forbidden societies, including Planned Parenthood, the Masons, the Society of St. Pius X, Call to Action, and others. These are all organizations that in some way oppose the Catholic Church. Planned Parenthood performs abortion. The Masons, as you know, are not really Christian. They're really more of a worship of some other deity, not Jesus Christ and the Trinity. Okay? And they have, in various points in history, conspired to try to destroy the church with varying degrees of success. The Society of St. Pius X, as you remember, is the group of people who object to some of the teachings of Vatican II, saying they change too much, and all of that. Call to Action thinks we should have women priests and other such things. Anyway, all of these people, back I think it was in 1993, maybe 1996, Bishop Emeritus Bruskowitz said anyone who joined any of these organizations would have 6 weeks to get out, and then they would be excommunicated, which means they would not be able to receive any sacraments. This created quite a stir, because especially with the Call to Action Society, members of these societies sometimes profess to be good Catholics, okay, who love the church. And some of them actually challenged, like, you can't excommunicate us, and they appealed to Rome and were like, he can't excommunicate us, and Rome was like, no, actually he can. He's completely within his rights of what he's doing. This was not something most bishops were doing, okay, but this is something Bishop Bruskowitz did, and it was quite notable. Another thing that Bishop Bruskowitz did that was very non-conformist, that other bishops looked at as kind of like, well, what? Was his refusal to sign the Dallas Charter for the Protection of Children and Young People, which you may remember us talking about that. And it wasn't because he wanted to not protect children, it was because he didn't like the people he had put on the review board, and he didn't want to assume his priests were guilty until proven innocent. Okay? In addition to being controversial, Bishop Bruskowitz Bishop Bruskowitz was big on seminaries. Okay, Bishop Flavin was big on vocations. Bishop Bruskowitz was big on seminaries. He founded St. Gregory the Great Seminary out in Seward. They bought an old psychiatric hospital, turned it into a seminary, and then he allowed the priestly fraternity of St. Peter, which celebrates that old mass of the Council of Trent, to found a seminary in Denton, Nebraska. So we here in the Diocese of Lincoln actually have 2 different seminaries in a area with a Catholic population of 90,000. That's kind of a big deal. By the way, just in case I didn't make this clear, I really like Bishop Bruskowitz. I think he was great. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. You can make up your own mind. You don't have to like him to get a good grade in my class. But I just wanted to make it very clear. I like him. All right. Finally, Bishop Conley. Bishop Conley is our current bishop. Yes, he is on medical leave, but he is still our bishop. Archbishop Lucas is not our bishop. He is our apostolic administrator. Bishop Conley actually didn't grow up Catholic. He grew up nominally, I think it was Presbyterian. I forget. He's part Native American. I remember that. And as you can see from this photo, he and his good friend, Bishop Coakley of Oklahoma City, were on the same baseball team when they were kids. I don't know if they were in middle school or high school or what here, but they were on the same baseball team when they were kids, and they remain good friends to this day. Now, Bishop Conley converted in college. Bishop Conley went to the University of Kansas, and completely by chance, from what I've heard, he was not the sort of kid who was naturally interested in this sort of thing. But completely by chance, he enrolled in what was called the Integrated Humanities Program. And the Integrated Humanities Program was not a Catholic program, okay? But the idea is that they would they would educate the students first by having them read good books. Okay, there were no textbooks in the Integrated Humanities Program. They were classic books. They were reading Shakespeare, and um, they were reading books by ancient Greek and Roman authors that are known as classics, and they were reading Charles Dickens, and they were reading, instead of a geometry textbook, they would have had Euclid, from ancient Greece. Okay, so they were reading these classic works from all throughout history, kind of like on a bigger scale what we did in this class, where we would read things from the church councils, and we would read things from J.R.R. Tolkien and Flannery O'Connor and Dante and Boccaccio, okay? But they were doing that like for all of their classes, everything in those classes, okay? And one of the things that happened with this integrated humanities program, even though it wasn't a Catholic program, people started becoming Catholic left and right, okay? It got so good, the university actually shut the program down because it was making too many converts. It didn't look like it belonged at a state school, okay? But while it was going, it was a really, really amazing way of education that introduced people to, beautiful things for the first time in some cases. I don't think Bishop Conley was, honestly, from what I've heard, I don't think he was much of a reader before he got into college, okay? And people started becoming Catholic because they started discovering the church and how much historically the church makes sense and how much beauty it has produced over the years. I wish I could teach you that well, but um, alas, oh well. So anyway, so Bishop Conley became Catholic, and carried a step further, became a priest, and the Pope was like, "Hey, now you will be a bishop." He was an assistant bishop in Denver before he became the Bishop of Lincoln. Bishop Conley, as you know, has had to deal with a lot of difficult things during his time here as bishop, with priests who have done things that are not the greatest. And it is also, he has also talked about how he suffered from depression and various other health issues. So he is on medical leave. He is resting. He's trying to figure out if he can get his life put together in such a way that he can actually, be a good bishop. Um, so anyway, we need to pray for him. We need to pray that he comes back. Um, and if there's any way you want to honor our current bishop, a great thing to do would be read classic literature. Read, some of these books that we've read in class. If there was one that you liked, hey, go find the full thing, read the whole thing. Well, that's it. That's the last video of the year. Please remember, there is a quiz to take this week. It covers everything from the Enlightenment up until the Diocese of Lincoln. I have to make it still, but it will be made, so check down at the bottom of the page for it. Next, there will be, of course, be that week before finals where there will not be new stuff. I'm hoping to set up like Zoom office hours. We can chat. You just kind of come in and come out of the conversation as you see fit. Hoping to set that up. Sorry I haven't done that earlier. These videos have taken a little more time. Anyway, I know I said this before, but I'm going to say it again. I have really enjoyed teaching you guys this year. I have been very interested to see how we adjust things during coronavirus. I've enjoyed that too. But, I have had a lot of fun in class this year, more than I expected. And it's really been a pleasure teaching all of you. So I wish you all the best, and I am sure that I will continue to see you in the years ahead.